Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Welcome to today's reading from Brilliant as the Sun, a retelling of Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 5, the Universal Order. We are going to begin chapter 7, the Adventures of King Bharat. Mukam karoti vachalam pangum langhayate girim yat kripatamam vande Shri Gurum Deenatarinam Paramananda Madhavam Shri Chaitanya Ishwaram Hari Om Tat Sat. Near total darkness shrouded the assembly, which sat in silent anticipation of Shukadev's next topic. There was sudden commotion of squawking and clucking as night herons descended onto the river. Shukadev paused his narration until the noise died down and the only sound was the gently lapping waters of the Ganges. Verses 1 and 2, the sage said, Rishabh was an incarnation of Krishna and his son Bharat was a topmost devotee. Before leaving, Rishabh installed Bharat on the throne. Under his father's directions, Bharat married Vishwarupa's daughter Panchajani and ruled the earth according to the same principles as his father. In course of time, Panchajani gave birth to 5 sons. Verses 3 and 4. Formerly the earth was named Ajanabha Varsha. After King Nabhi, or is it Ajanab? I'll have to check. However, since King Bharat's reign, it has become known as Bharat Varsh. With great wisdom and expertise, Bharat carried out his prescribed duties. He ruled the people as affectionately as had his father and grandfather. And he ensured that the citizens properly discharged their occupational duties. Verse 5, Bharat faithfully performed sacrifices to worship Vishnu with 4 kinds of priests overseeing them. These would sometimes entail the sacrifice of an animal and at other times the offering of Somarasa. Parikshit cast his mind back to the many sacrifices he had performed on the advice of his court Brahmins. He knew that the sacrifice of animals meant that they immediately received rejuvenated bodies or even elevation to the human form, but he had always felt uneasy that he may implicate himself in materialistic works. It seemed odd that a great soul like Bharat also performed Vedic ritual sacrifices. He said, Master, I am surprised that despite being such an elevated devotee, Bharat performed Vedic sacrifices for his personal benefit. What makes you think he performed them for material gain? Well, Vedic sacrifices are dharma, which is performed to attain wealth, enjoyment, and liberation. These are all selfish goals. I will repeat. Vedic sacrifices are dharma, which is performed to attain wealth, enjoyment, and liberations, and all of these are selfish goals. Verse 6, Shukadev said, that is generally the case, but Bharat executed dharma for Krishna's pleasure. So this is how Bharat Maharaj was different than everybody else. As the emperor, it was his duty to perform these sacrifices, as I'm sure you know. However, while carrying out his duties, he would consider how they were ordained by Krishna and meant for his satisfaction. This is how every devotee should think when performing his worldly work. I'll repeat. However, while carrying out his duties, we are referring to Bharat Maharaj here, he would consider how they were ordained by Krishna and meant for his satisfaction. This is how every devotee should think when performing his worldly work. So even our worldly work has to be performed in that mood. Parikshit had also thought that way. However, because sacrifice entailed worship of the gods, He had felt uncomfortable. He said, "How is it possible to please Krishna with such sacrifices when one must supplicate the gods?" That is a Devi Devatas. Shukadev said, when Bharat's priests offer oblations to the gods, he saw them as Krishna's limbs. So this is the key, that when Bharat Maharaj's priests offered the oblations to the gods, the sacrifices to the god, he saw them as the Krishna's limbs. So this is how Krishna gets pleased. When the priest invoked Indra, Bharat thought this is worship of Krishna's arm. When Surya was invoked, Bharat thought this is worship of Krishna's eyes. In this way, throughout each sacrifice, he meditated on worshipping Krishna and was therefore not contaminated by attachment, lust or greed. Verse 7, since he fixed his consciousness on Krishna, his devotion increased daily by performance of sacrifice. He similarly taught the Ashtanga yogis and the Jnana yogis how to turn their worship into pure devotional service. The Ashtanga yogis need only know that the supersoul on whom they meditate is Krishna's expansion, and the Jnanis that the impersonal Brahman is Krishna's bodily effulgence. So Ashtanga yogis need to know that the supersoul on whom they meditate is Krishna's expansion, and the Jnanis that the impersonal Brahman is Krishna's bodily effulgence. Devotees like Narad, however, directly worship the deity form. When that is not possible, they meditate on Krishna's four-armed form, holding conch shell, disc, club and lotus flower, his chest decorated with the Srivatsa, Kaustubh and garland flower. Verse 8, after 10 million years, Bharat divided his inherited wealth among his sons and left his opulent home, heading for Pulah Ashram in Haridwar. So we can just see that in that yuga, the lifespan was so many millions and millions of years. This is the luxury we don't have in this lifetime. So let's make most of whatever we have been given. Parikshit said, Pulah Ashram, is that not the place of Shalagram Shilas? Verse 9 to 10, yes, even today, out of affection for his devotees, the Lord appears there in whichever of his forms they desire to worship. The Shalagrams appear in the holy Gandaki river. They look like marble pebbles and are recognized by the distinctive holes and circles which decorate them. Verse 11, Bharat lived alone in the gardens of Pulah Ashram. He worshipped Krishna with the flowers, twigs and leaves of tulsi plants. And with water from the Gandaki river, he offered Krishna roots, fruits and bulbs and ate his remnants. He had not even a tinge of material desire and was satisfied by simply serving Krishna. Verse 12, because of his constant service, his heart melted with love for Krishna. He experienced the 8 bodily transformations of ecstatic love. He horripilated and tears flowed from his eyes, so much so he could hardly see anything. Absorbed in the meditation on Krishna's reddish lotus feet, his heart overflowed with love and he lost interest in his regulative service. Verse 13, the king appeared most attractive, dressed in a black deer skin. Because he took 3 baths daily, his thick matted hair hung in wet curls around his face. He worshipped the effulgent form of Surya Narayan by chanting this hymn from the Rig Veda at sunrise. Verse 14, I worship Surya Narayan who is in pure goodness. He illuminates the universe which he creates from his own energy and enters as the supersoul. He maintains the living entities and gives them the intelligence to fulfill their desires. Shukadev closed his eyes, absorbed in thought. After a few moments he said, listen now, my dear king, as I describe what happened next. So with this we come to end of chapter 7, which was a very short chapter, the adventures of King Bharat. And next chapter will be Bharat becomes a deer. So thank you for joining. We will continue with our reading next time. Hare Tat Sat. Hare Krishna.